I'm evaluating, that's hard to say, I'm evaluating some shears that were sent to me as part of the ISSA, International Scissor Sharpeners Association certification. I won't mention his name or her name or where they're from, but I think you will benefit from this, both those who are watching and the person that sent the shears to me. So let's hang on and see. So a little bit about the International Scissor Sharpeners Association and the certification. This is different than a contest where we're seeing who's the best. This is more like a test in school, and it's more like, I'd say, a pre-test. I used to teach high school, and sometimes we would give a little test to begin with to see how much they knew, and then they would give a test. I would give a test at the end of whatever subject I was teaching. So I'm going to look at this as sort of like a pre-test. And when I do these evaluations, and you're going to be able to benefit from watching this if you haven't done the test, because I'm going to tell you some of the answers before we begin. But I send out a written test, and I ask, it kind of helps me know what you know and where some of your problems might be if your shears aren't cutting like they should. And this is the test. And this person actually missed 2 questions. And the number one, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we look at the shears, because it'll probably be evident in the way the shears perform or look or whatever, is which area should receive the most pressure when creating the rod line. Now, when you do the rod line, you are going to put your pressure over the pivot hole. This person put the center. If you don't do the pivot hole and you do the center, let me show you what happens. So this is the 8000 grit DMT diamond hone that we sometimes use. It's not my favorite hone to use, but I think it's a good one to show why you need to put your pressure over the pivot hole rather than the center. And this is a really good example of a shear to do that with, because it has an extra large bow to it. So this would definitely be one you might want to set the alignment on. But if I'm pressing here and I press hard enough, that bow will flatten out so that this whole area will touch. And the ride line or the hone line is going to be coming down here, and it's a backwards J. If I press here, and I want you to watch what happens to that shear. If I press here, do you see? It goes up. Now this one's an extreme example, but even if you have one that is perfectly in alignment, it's not going to, you're not going to have your ride line touching here, and you're going to have what I call a relaxed ride line. And so it'll be, when the blades come together, they won't really cut and touch like they should. So it's super important that your pressure be here. And so that's one question he missed. So the other question that was missed by him or her is, if the tip pulls, what problem would be easiest to fix? And actually he chose the hardest one, which is the bad alignment. Because to fix the alignment, like I think this shear is definitely out of alignment, you would have to either bend it or hammer it to get it, or break it, which is always the third option, and that's not going to get you where you want to be. If the tip pulls and you're cutting the tissue and it just has a little bit of pull, sometimes the only thing that's wrong with it is you've left a little burr on the outside. And sometimes it is just as easy as scraping it on your jeans to make that shear cut. You can use a leather strop, you can use your jeans, you can use the infamous nail buffer, which those of you that know me know I love to use my nail buffer. Sometimes it's just as easy as wiping it off with a cloth. If you've left a little burr on the outside of your blade, it can snag the tissue and pull the hair. So that is the easiest to fix. I'm not saying that's going to be what the problem is, but before you do anything crazy like trying to bend a blade, just wipe it off. Just kind of see if that takes care of it. So that is the 2 questions that were missed. Now let's look at the shears. So I sent him a beveled edge and a convex edge. let's look at the beveled edge first and let's see what's going on here. Okay, first of all, I'm just evaluating it. First of all, the tips do not meet. Let me see if I can help you see that. And can you see those tips definitely do not meet? One of these tips looked a little burnt. Just a tad. And when I hold this up, I want you to see how the angle changes too on this shear. Okay, do you see how that it has a little bit of color on it, but do you see how the angle sort of changes? And I haven't done anything to wipe them off or test them yet. But let's just kind of evaluate that edge on these beveled edges. We're going to talk about good and bad things here. One of the good things I see is, oh, here's where I see the color. It's more on the inside. You see that color? That tip turned a little dark. It looks like he overheated it when he sharpened them. But one of the good things I see is he didn't try to make these into a pair of shears they're not designed to do. A lot of times when I send these out for evaluation, they've tried to work a ride line, and these don't have a hollow grain to them at all. These are what they are. Now, let's see how they cut. The adjustment looks right. And I'm going to cut some dry tissue. So I'm going to use just a little pressure. Cuts nice. Let's try it wet. And on these cheap scissors like this, if they cut dry, I mean, that's that's pretty good because they're not that good a shear. And looks like, and the other thing I saw that he did right is he did follow the angle of the shears. If he wants me to send them back for him to try to fix that tip and make sure that angle is consistent so that he'll pass on these, we can do that. Another sharpening, as long as you don't overheat it, will correct that little bit of discoloration. There's also some chemicals that can be used. Okay, wet tissue, pulling my thumb out. It cuts wet tissue, not beautifully. There's a little bit of raggedness in there, but it cuts wet tissue. So, in my evaluation on these shears, this is how we evaluate the cut, the feel, the inside blade, and the outside blade. So the inside blade would pass. Outside blade needs some work. The feel, I think they feel pretty good. And then the cut, they cut good. So really the only thing that he's missing is the outside blade and also the tips not meeting. Now, the interesting things about tips not meeting, and this is something you need to know, is you see it cut the wet tissue with the tips not meeting. Let's see how it cuts hair. My poor little mannequin. If you're ever wanting to find mannequins like this, check with the cosmetology schools. A lot of times they have some they're throwing out. They gave us a huge bag of mannequins. In fact, I should have put that in the jam bargaining thing. May need to add a few things at the end. But these will work well for testing clipper blades or whatever. So I'm going to cut some hair. And it doesn't push, but when I cut the hair, that tip, can you see? It pulls hair. There's hair that's stuck in the tip. So it's, you're going to notice it when you cut hair. See? I'm going to do this again. When I cut that tip, see, it's just a little bit of a pull, and you don't want that. So, always when you get through with a pair of shears, after you finish sharpening them, always double check that tip and fix that. You know what? I think that's come together now, has it? Let me get my light out. Sometimes it's weird like that. Sometimes if you've left a little nick or something in there, or you've opened and closed it a few times, the tip will come together. But you saw, nope, it's still, I'm just imagining it. It's just teeny tiny. But you want to check that tip, but you also want to feel and see if it's sharp. Because if it's a sharp and pointy tip, you're going to need to round it off, because if they're going in somebody's head, it'll scratch them. So that's the evaluation on the beveled edge. The convex edge. Where did I put it? Here it is. This is the ones that we use for training here as well. So first thing I'm going to do is check the adjustment. Yeah, that's it. It moves without flopping, so the adjustment looks correct. Feels a little rough. I don't know if you can hear it. I'll be real quiet. Little bit of noise, but not too bad. I don't think any hairstylist would notice it. It's definitely not a convex edge. And let me show you what I'm looking at here. Once again, these little lights are invaluable. Yeah, when you look at this, you'll definitely see a bevel. Let me hold this up here. See, it's no doubt that's a bevel. That's not a convex. He has not convexed it. It's beveled. And the other thing I'm seeing, well, the tips do come together. And they're not sharp and pointy. And the way I damage these, I put a few nicks in them, and I just sort of put a nail file, so it's a little bit dulled out. These shears, when they're new, they have a little tiny micro bevel, but I asked for these shears to be convexed, so they definitely, the little teeny tiny micro bevel you can barely see is now a pretty distinctive bevel. So if someone sharpened like these, even, and we'll test them, they may cut okay, and they probably do, but another sharpener would come along behind you and say, hey, look what he's done. He's changed the angle of your shears. He's made it a bevel, or she. And so we need to, use me as a sharpener because I can do it correctly. So you need to be careful. So the big thing is that you don't want to repeat that. Now, I'm expecting some issues with the ride line. And it really doesn't look that bad. If I look close, though, I'm still seeing a few nicks in here. Oh, yeah, when I look at it close, yeah, that ride line is, you can see it is ramped down. Let me see if you can see that with me. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's no longer a flat ride line. Okay, we're in here, and can you see how that ride line is ramped down? And it just looks rough. Yeah, when you get the light on it and you start looking at it close, you see all kinds of things your naked eye might not see. And I'm not saying every time you sharpen a pair of shears you need to get out your magnifier and study it. I'm just saying when you're having problems or you're learning, that's a good learning tool. And then other times when you want to show something to your stylist, for instance, that these shears have been beveled instead of convex, that light is really helpful. So let's see how they cut. All right, dry tissue. We'll try that first. And I'm going to pull my thumb out. And the way I do this, now everybody can do it different, and I've been doing this for 30 years, so it's kind of second nature to me. But I pull my thumb out and I'm holding them like this. And then I kind of lean them forward till that blade is on my tissue. And I like to have the whole blade. And you see, it's not cutting dry. Let's see if it cuts wet. If it doesn't cut dry, it's not going to cut wet. But I mean, just for the fun of it, we'll do it. See? Can you see it tore, but it's not cutting. Now, sometimes, let's see if I use pressure. See, even pressure, it's not working. I'm cutting like I normally. Now, if I used a lot of pressure just now, a lot of side pressure, but even at that tip was pulling. See that? Let's see how it cuts hair. see, it's not too bad on cutting hair, which is proof that when someone's a mediocre sharpener, maybe it won't cut wet tissue or dry tissue when they're through. It might still cut hair enough that the hairstylist is like, oh yeah, you did a good job, I'll use your next time. But we all want to strive toward excellence, and we all want to strive to the point where we can kind of build a little wall around ourselves to protect ourselves from another sharpener coming in who may be better trained or better equipment or better skilled. So these definitely need some work. I'm going to try something before we give up on them. I can find my handy dandy nail buffer. There it is. I love these things because it's 3000 grit. And sometimes, and that was what that last question was about what's the easiest thing to do if it pulls hair. And sometimes it's a little burr that's left on the outside. Now, when I run my thumb down here, I can feel a little, like a little nick and maybe a little burr on the outside. The other thing I do with my thumb is I go in here and kind of feel and see how sharp it is. And that kind of tells me if it's been rounded off by polish. May take a little, little time. Yeah, right here it feels really rounded off. See, that doesn't catch on the callus on my thumb. Up here it catches. So right in here is not as sharp as up there. But just for the fun of it, let's go over it with a nail buffer. And I'm using, and I'm flat on the inside. And I think a lot of the problems on this is that ride line. If this was sharpened with the pressure put on the pivot, that may have been all that was wrong with it. So let's just see if that little thing with the nail buffer made any difference on the cut. Once again, I'm pulling my thumb out. No. Let's see, sometimes opening up the shears. Always, if a shear doesn't cut, try the simplest things first. The nail buffer, and check that screw. We're going to wiggle that screw good. And it did loosen up some. That makes the washer seat in there better. I'm double checking the back. Sometimes a washer will protrude, and something that simple is all that's wrong, and you're going back trying to resharpen a pair of shears when the only thing wrong is the washer. So it's loosened up some. I'm going to do it one click tighter, which is about where he had it before I wiggled it. And let's see if that makes any difference. Who knows? No. So I would say neither one of these shears really passed what I think should be adequate sharpening, somebody I would feel comfortable recommending for a sharpener. However, that doesn't mean that neither one of these or either one of these would not pass for your typical hairstylist who would cut with them and say, oh, these are okay, yeah, because they don't know how good they could be. So I'm not saying until you get it corrected, don't go out there and sharpen, but definitely do the things you need to do, whether it's training, skill practice, equipment, just being more conscious of the things I covered to get you to that next level. I'll just send them back as they are, and now that you know what you're supposed to do and what I'm looking for, we'll see how you do next time. My purpose in doing these certifications, evaluations, or whatever you want to call it for the International Scissor Sharpeners Association is, as I said, not to judge you, but to give you some evaluation and criteria to know what you need to do to become a better sharpener. And I don't hold myself up as the best sharpener out there, but I've been around the block. The International Scissor Sharpeners Association is truly international. It's a very loose organization. We may eventually have something more formal as far as meetings. We've had one. We had it in Germany last year. But there is as many members from outside the United States as there are in the United States. And it was started many years ago by a sharpener from Cyprus who said we need more credentials. And then had a nice logo and design, so we have a really nice certificate that shows that you're a member of the ISSA. And it is helpful if you're going into a salon to show them that you're a member. And we don't have an annual membership. It's a one-time and you've joined, because it's not about having a money thing. It's about giving all of us a little bit of the gravitas to be able to get a little bit more sharpening business. And also it's about helping, all of us as sharpeners become better sharpeners. And that's the bottom line, right? So we have a lot of videos. You need to subscribe to the channel. You need to the little notifications. And I'm also suggesting that you join the Facebook group called Sharpeners Jam Group. There's a Sharpeners Jam page, but it's also a Sharpeners Jam group. And if you're watching this video this week, on this weekend, which is May 16th, 17th, and 18th, that group will have a lot of education all weekend. Not just me. I think I'm just doing maybe one class. But there will be a lot of classes on different kinds of sharpening, marketing, and I think you'll get a lot of benefits from it. And it's free to attend. It's not anything making any of us any money. It's something that helps us all become better sharpeners. And that in the bottom line makes hairstylists or groomers better stylists and groomers, and makes people and dogs and those that are getting haircuts just happier and better looking. So in our own little way, we're essential workers and we're blessing the world, right? Yeah. That's right. Okay, thanks.